He shouldn't still be there. Not in this kind of cold. Not with rain cutting sideways through the parking lot and the wind dragging loose paper across the asphalt like restless ghosts. And yet the dog doesn't move. A German shepherd sitting just beyond the yellow glow of a flickering hospital light, his coat soaked dark along the spine, water dripping steadily from his ears, his paws planted as if the ground itself had asked him to stay. And maybe it had, because for the past 8 hours no one has seen him lie down. No one has seen him turn away, not even when the temperature dropped below 40 and the night air began to bite through skin and fabric alike. He just sits there facing a single glass door, the automatic kind that hums and opens for everyone except him, because he never tries to go in, not once, as if whatever he's waiting for isn't outside and isn't something that can be reached by stepping forward. A security guard tried earlier, a man named Collins with a tired back, and a coffee that had gone cold in his hand. He approached slow, careful, the way you do with animals that might bolt or snap. But this one didn't do either. The dog only lifted his head slightly, amber eyes catching the light, steady, not aggressive, not afraid, just certain. And when Collins reached for the collar, the dog let out a low sound, not a growl, not quite, something deeper, something that didn't warn, but refused, like a quiet no spoken in a language older than commands. So Collins stepped back, muttering something about animal control, but he never made the call, because something about the way that dog looked at the door made it feel wrong to interrupt, like walking into a prayer you weren't invited to. Inside the hospital the night moved like it always does, machines humming, nurses passing in soft-soled shoes, monitors blinking in steady rhythms that meant life was still holding on somewhere. But no one paid attention to room 214 at the far end of the ICU corridor. Not really, just another patient, unidentified, brought in hours before, no wallet, no phone, no one asking for him. Just a man lying still beneath sterile sheets, his breathing assisted, his body quiet in that fragile way that doesn't promise anything. And yet, every so often, the monitor beside him flickers in a way no one quite explains, a slight shift, a rhythm that hesitates and then corrects itself, subtle enough to ignore, easy enough to dismiss as machine error or coincidence. Except it only happens at certain moments, moments that no one inside the room notices. But outside, beyond the glass, beyond the automatic doors, the dog lifts his head just a fraction, ears twitching towards something no human ear can catch, his nose tilting slightly into the rain-soaked air as if searching for a scent buried beneath antiseptic and distance and time. And for a second, just a second, his body leans forward, not enough to move, never enough to break whatever silent line he has drawn between himself and that door, but enough to suggest that whatever he is waiting for isn't gone, not completely, not yet. And the strangest part is not that he stays, but how he stays. No pacing, no whining, no restless shifting, just stillness, the kind of stillness that doesn't come from training alone, but from memory, from something held on to long after the world has let go. Because somewhere behind those steady eyes is a moment that never ended, a command that was never released, a promise that never got the chance to be broken. And so the dog waits, through the rain, through the cold, through the passing hours that stretch and bend into something heavier than time. Waiting not because he was told to, but because leaving was never an option. And inside, in room 214, the monitor flickers again, just once, like a heartbeat remembering something it thought it had already lost. By 3 in the morning the rain has thinned into a cold mist that clings to everything it touches, turning the parking lot into a mirror of blurred lights and long reflections. And still the dog remains, unmoving except for the slow rise and fall of his chest, as if he has learned to measure time not in minutes, but in breaths, each one steady, deliberate, counted against something only he understands. And inside the hospital the night nurse on rotation, a woman named Karen Whitlock with tired eyes and a habit of noticing things others overlook, pauses at the window for just a moment longer than necessary, her hand resting lightly against the glass as she studies the shape outside, the outline of a German shepherd sitting in the damp glow. And there is something about the posture that unsettles her, not because it looks threatening, but because it looks purposeful, like a soldier holding position long after the battle has ended. And that thought lingers as she turns back toward the corridor, her steps soft against the polished floor as she makes her way toward room 214. Because something there has been bothering her too, something small and easy to dismiss. The way the monitor shifts in tiny irregular patterns. The way the patient's breathing seems to hesitate at times as if caught between staying and leaving. And when she enters the room, the air feels still, heavier than the rest of the unit. The faint scent of antiseptic mixing with something warmer, something almost familiar, though she cannot place it, and she glances at the man in the bed, his face partially turned away, features softened by stillness, no identification band beyond a temporary tag, no visitors, no story attached to his name because there is no name yet, just another unknown life suspended in the quiet machinery of care, and yet as she steps closer the monitor gives a subtle shift, a slight increase in rhythm that causes her to pause, her eyes narrowing just a fraction, because it is not dramatic, not enough to call a doctor, but enough to notice, enough to feel, and outside, as if in answer, the dog lifts his head again, ears angling toward the building, his nose drawing in the damp air with a slow, searching breath, and for a moment his body trembles, not from the cold, but from something deeper, something that moves through memory instead of muscle, a faint echo of dust and sun and distant commands carried across miles that no longer exist, and his tail flicks once against the wet pavement before settling again, his gaze fixed on that same door, unwavering, unbroken. And back inside, Karen takes another step closer to the bed, her voice quiet, as she speaks more to herself than to the patient, saying you are not alone even though she knows he cannot hear her. And yet as the words leave her lips the monitor shifts again, just slightly, a rhythm catching and then finding itself, and Karen exhales slowly, a strange feeling settling in her chest. The kind that does not come from logic or training but from something softer, something instinctive. And she glances back toward the window at the far end of the hall, where she knows that dog is still waiting, and for the first time that night, she wonders if the two are somehow connected, not by anything she can prove, not by anything she can chart or measure, but by something quieter, something that does not need permission to exist. And outside the dog remains exactly where he has been, steady, against the fading storm, holding his silent vigil as if the night itself depends on it. As if leaving now would mean losing something that has not yet found its way back. Just before dawn the world holds its breath in that fragile space between night and morning, when the sky is still dark but no longer belongs to the dark, and the air carries a quiet chill that settles deep into bone. And out in the parking lot the dog finally shifts, not to leave, not even to step forward, but to stand, slowly, deliberately, as if something unseen has called his name in a language older than sound. His legs stiff from hours of stillness yet steady, his body aligning toward the glass doors with a focus that feels almost reverent. And inside the hospital Karen pauses again in the hallway, her chart forgotten in her hand as she notices the change on the monitor in room 214, not dramatic, not urgent, but different, the kind of difference that makes a person stop and look twice. The rhythm slightly stronger now, less uncertain, like a heartbeat remembering its purpose. And she steps into the room once more, drawn by something she cannot explain, her eyes moving from the machine to the man and back again, searching for a reason, a pattern, anything that would make sense of the feeling settling quietly in her chest. And as she moves closer the first pale light of morning begins to slip through the narrow window, soft and gray, brushing against the edges of the bed and the still figure beneath the sheets. And outside that same light catches in the dog's eyes, turning them briefly to glass, reflecting something deeper than the world in front of him, something stored in memory, something that does not fade with time, and he takes a single step forward, stopping just short of the threshold as the automatic doors slide open for someone else, a nurse passing through without noticing him, and the dog does not enter, he never enters, as if he understands that this boundary matters, that whatever he is waiting for must come to him, not the other way around. And he lowers his head slightly, breathing in, slow and steady, as though tracing a path through sin alone, past rain, past asphalt, past the sterile walls and into something warmer, something human. And inside the room Karen sees it then, a faint movement so small she almost misses it, a subtle shift in the man's hand resting against the blanket, not enough to call a code. Not enough to declare anything changed, but enough to make her step closer, her voice soft as she says, "Can you hear me?" Even though she does not expect an answer, and for a moment nothing happens. Just the quiet hum of machines and the distant sound of footsteps in the hall. But then, the monitor lifts again, a slight rise, a stronger beat, and Karen feels it before she understands it. That something is happening that has nothing to do with medicine alone, and outside the dog's ears twitch sharply, his body going still once more, every part of him focused, listening, waiting, as if the world has narrowed to a single invisible thread stretching between him and that room, and the light grows a little stronger, the sky softening toward morning, and somewhere between those two places, between the waiting and the waking, something begins to return, not fully, not yet, but enough to be felt, enough to be known, even before it can be seen. The first ray of sunlight does not arrive all at once, but seeps gently through the horizon, pale and uncertain, as if even the morning is hesitant to interrupt what the night has been holding together, and outside the hospital the dog stands motionless, his silhouette now clearer against the fading darkness, every line of his body drawn tight with quiet purpose, his gaze fixed on the same glass doors that have never opened for him, not once. And yet something has changed, something subtle but undeniable, the way his ears angle forward, the way his breathing slows, as though he is no longer searching but listening for something that has finally begun to answer. And inside room 214, Karen leans closer to the bedside, her fingers hovering just above the blanket as she watches the man's hand, because she knows what she saw, even if it was only a fraction of movement, even if it could be explained away, and the monitor beside him continues its quiet rhythm. But now there is strength in it, a steadiness that was not there before, like a distant echo becoming a voice, and she speaks again, softer this time, almost a whisper meant for something deeper than hearing, saying, "You can come back now. You are safe." And for a moment the room remains still, suspended in that fragile silence where nothing seems to happen and everything might. And then the smallest shift, a twitch of the fingers, barely there, but real, undeniably real, and Karen inhales sharply, her heart catching in her chest as she steps closer, her eyes fixed on the man's face, searching for any sign, any response, and outside the dog takes another step, stopping again at the invisible line he will not cross, his paws pressing lightly against the damp pavement as his head lowers just slightly, his nose drawing in a long, steady breath. And this time there is no hesitation, no uncertainty, only recognition, something found rather than searched for, and his body softens for the first time all night, not relaxing, not fully, but enough to show that the weight he has been carrying has shifted, just a little, and inside the room the man's breathing changes, subtle but present, a deeper pull of air, a faint release, and Karen feels it again, that unexplainable connection, the sense that something beyond her understanding is unfolding in quiet, deliberate steps, and she glances toward the window at the far end of the hall, knowing without seeing that the dog is still there, still waiting, and for reasons she cannot name she moves toward the door, her steps slow, almost careful, as if approaching something sacred, and when she reaches the glass, she sees him clearly now, the German shepherd standing in the morning light, eyes steady, unwavering, and for a moment they simply look at each other, human and animal separated by glass and distance, and everything that should make them strangers, and yet in that stillness there is understanding, a silent agreement, that something important is happening, something that neither of them can stop nor fully explain. And behind her, in room 214, the monitor gives another steady rise, stronger this time, and the space between breaths begins to close, not in urgency, but in return, slow and certain, like a promise remembered just in time. Morning has fully arrived now, not with noise or urgency, but with a quiet clarity that settles over the building and the empty parking lot, washing away the last traces of night. And still the dog remains at the edge of the entrance, his fur drying slowly in the early light, his posture no longer rigid but steady in a different way, as if the waiting has shifted into something else, something closer to knowing. And inside the hospital, Karen stands between the glass doors and the long corridor. Behind her, caught in that strange space where instinct speaks louder than protocol, her hand resting lightly on the metal bar as she looks back, once toward room 214 and then forward again toward the dog. And for a moment she hesitates. Because there are rules. There are always rules. But something about the past few hours has made those rules feel smaller, less certain. And she exhales softly before pressing the door open just enough to step outside, the cool morning air brushing against her face as she approaches him slowly, careful not to startle, though something tells her he will not move unless he chooses to. And when she stops a few feet away, the dog turns his head slightly, meeting her gaze with those steady amber eyes, not pleading, not demanding, simply present, and she kneels just a little, her voice gentle as she speaks, saying, "Hey there. You have been out here all night," and the dog blinks once, slow and deliberate, as if acknowledging the words without needing them. And Karen glances back toward the building, toward the room where the man lies between stillness and return, and she feels it again, that quiet connection threading through everything. And without fully understanding why, she steps aside, opening the door wider this time, not calling him in, not commanding, just allowing. And for a heartbeat, nothing happens. The dog remains where he is, holding that invisible line. And then, slowly, he moves, one step forward, then another, crossing the threshold not with hesitation, but with purpose, his paws silent against the tile floor as he enters the building for the first time. And the change is immediate, not in the room, not yet, but in the air itself, something softening, something aligning, and Karen walks beside him, not leading, not guiding, simply accompanying as he moves down the corridor with quiet certainty, past nurses and carts and the ordinary motion of morning, none of which seem to exist to him, his focus fixed ahead as if he can already see what waits at the end. And when they reach the door of room 214, he stops, his body going still once more, but this time it is not the stillness of waiting, it is the stillness of arrival. And inside, the monitor continues its steady rhythm, stronger now, clearer, and the man's breathing has deepened, each inhale more certain than the last, and Karen rests her hand on the door handle, her heart beating just a little faster as she looks down at the dog. And in his eyes there is no doubt, no question, only recognition, as if the distance that once separated them has already disappeared. And she opens the door slowly, letting the quiet of the room welcome them both, and the dog steps forward without a sound, crossing into the space where something long held has finally found its way home. The room does not change when the dog enters, not in any way that could be measured or recorded. The machines continue their steady rhythm. The light remains soft and pale against the walls, and yet something shifts in a way that cannot be named, something quiet but undeniable, as if the air itself has been waiting for this moment to complete a sentence left unfinished. And the dog moves forward slowly, each step deliberate, his paws silent against the floor as he approaches the bed, his gaze never leaving the man lying there. And for a moment he pauses at the edge, not from hesitation, but from recognition, as if confirming what he already knows. And then he lowers his head slightly, drawing in a breath, deep and steady. And this time there is no doubt, no searching, only certainty. And Karen stands just inside the doorway, watching without speaking, her hands still, her breath quiet. Because something in her understands that this moment does not belong to her. And on the bed the man's fingers twitch again, more clearly now, a small but undeniable movement that pulls the eye, that changes everything, and the monitor responds with a stronger, more confident rhythm, the sound no longer fragile but steady, like a voice returning after a long silence. And the dog takes one final step closer, closing the distance that had held him outside for so long, and gently, almost reverently, he rests his head against the side of the bed, not touching the man. Yet, just close enough, as if waiting for permission that does not need to be spoken. And for a second nothing happens. The room holds its breath, the quiet stretching into something sacred. And then the man's hand moves again, slowly, as if guided by something deeper than thought, his fingers shifting across the blanket until they find the dog's fur, and the contact is light, barely there. But it is enough, and the dog stills completely, his body softening in a way it had not all night, his eyes closing for just a moment as if absorbing the truth of it, as if anchoring himself to something he had refused to let go of. And the man's breathing deepens again, steadier now, more present, and a faint sound escapes his lips. Not a word yet, not fully formed, but something that carries meaning all the same. And Karen feels it in her chest before she understands it, that the connection she sensed was never imagined, that whatever bond exists between them is not bound by distance or time, or even consciousness. And she takes a slow step back, giving them space, because this is not a recovery measured in charts or timelines. This is something else, something that moves in quiet, unseen ways, and the dog remains there, head resting against the bed, unmoving except for the gentle rise and fall of his breathing, as if he has finally reached the place he was always meant to be, as if the long night has led exactly here, to this moment where waiting is no longer necessary, because what he came for has found its way back. The touch lingers, light but certain, as if both of them are afraid that anything more might break the fragile thread that has just been found again, and the room remains quiet except for the steady rhythm of the monitor and the soft, measured sound of breathing that no longer feels distant or borrowed but present, undeniably present. And the dog does not move away, not even an inch, his head still resting against the edge of the bed, his eyes half closed, not in sleep, but in something deeper, something like recognition settling into place, and the man's fingers curl slightly into the fur, a reflex at first, then something more deliberate, as if memory is beginning to rise through layers of silence, not all at once, not clearly, but enough to guide his hand, enough to keep him there. And Karen watches from the doorway, her hand lightly pressed against the frame, her breath slow, careful, because she knows this is not something to interrupt, not something to measure or record in the usual ways. This is something that unfolds on its own terms, and as seconds stretch into something softer, something steadier, the man's lips part slightly, a faint breath forming into the beginning of a word that does not quite arrive, not yet, but the effort is there, the intention, and that alone shifts something in the air, something that feels like the first step back from a long distance. And the dog hears it, or feels it, because his ears lift just a fraction, his body leaning ever so slightly closer, not pressing, not demanding, just present, just there, exactly where he needs to be. And the man's hand tightens just a little more, fingers threading into the thick fur as if anchoring himself to something real, something known, and the monitor responds again. The rhythm steady, confident now, no longer uncertain or searching, and the light in the room grows warmer as the morning advances, touching the edges of the bed, the lines of the man's face, the curve of the dog's back, and everything feels quieter, not empty, but complete in a way that words cannot quite hold. And Karen finally exhales, a breath she did not realize she had been holding, and she steps back. Another pace, giving them space not out of protocol but out of respect, because whatever has brought them to this moment is something she understands only in feeling, not in explanation. And for a long while nothing more happens, no sudden movement, no dramatic change, just the slow, steady return of something that had almost been lost, carried not by machines or medicine alone, but by something that waited through the night without question, without doubt, and now, at last, does not have to wait anymore. Time does not rush forward after that moment. It settles instead, like dust after a long journey, soft and unhurried. And the room holds a kind of quiet that feels earned, not empty, but full of something gentle and steady. And the dog remains where he is, his head still resting against the bed, his breathing now calm, even, as if the long vigil has finally eased its grip on him. And the man's hand does not fall away, it stays there, fingers curled lightly into the fur, not by accident anymore. Not by reflex, but by choice, small and fragile though it may be. And the morning light grows warmer, stretching across the floor and climbing slowly up the side of the bed, touching the man's face in a soft glow that reveals more life than before, more presence. And Karen steps quietly back into the room after giving them time, her movements careful, respectful, as she checks the monitor again. And this time there is no hesitation in what she sees. The rhythm is strong, consistent, no longer drifting, no longer uncertain, and she allows herself a small breath of relief, though she knows this is only the beginning, that recovery is never a single moment but a path, one step at a time, and still, this step matters, more than anything she could write down, and as she turns slightly, she notices something else, something small but impossible to ignore. The man's eyes, still closed, shift beneath their lids. A subtle movement that suggests something stirring beneath the surface. Something trying to rise, and she watches closely now, her attention fixed, and after a long, quiet second, the man's brow tightens just a fraction, a faint line forming as if he is reaching towards something just out of grasp, and the dog senses it instantly, his ears lifting, his body leaning closer without breaking the gentle contact. And then, slowly, the man's eyes open, not fully, not clearly, but enough, just enough to let light in, to let the world return in fragments, and his gaze is unfocused at first, drifting, searching without understanding, and then it stops, settling on the shape beside him, the familiar outline that does not need explanation, and something changes in that moment, something deeper than recognition, something that does not come from memory alone but from connection, and his lips part again, a faint breath forming into a sound, rough and quiet, but real, and this time it carries meaning, a single word, barely audible, but enough, and the dog responds not with movement or sound but with stillness, complete and certain, as if he has been waiting not just for the moment of return, but for this, for the voice, for the acknowledgement that what was never broken has simply found its way back, and Karen feels the weight of it settle into the room, not dramatic, not overwhelming, but steady and true, like something that was always meant to happen, and she steps back once more, letting the space belong to them. Because some reunions do not need witnesses, they only need time, and trust, and the quiet faith of something that waited without ever letting go. The word is barely there, carried on a breath that trembles between effort and memory, but it lands with a weight that changes everything, and the man's eyes, still unfocused, begin to steady as if guided by something more familiar than sight, something that does not need clarity to be understood, and his gaze settles fully now on the dog beside him. No confusion, no hesitation, only recognition that runs deeper than thought, and his fingers tighten just slightly in the fur, grounding himself in that presence, that certainty, and the dog does not move, not even when the man's hand shifts, not even when the room begins to fill again with the quiet sounds of morning routine. He remains exactly where he is, as if this moment has become his only task, his only purpose, and Karen watches from the side, her eyes soft, her movements slowed, because she knows she is witnessing something that does not belong to schedules or procedures, something that exists outside of everything she has been trained to measure, and the man's breathing deepens again, more controlled now, less fragile, each inhale steady, each exhale certain, and his lips part once more, the effort visible but no longer strained. And though the word does not fully form again, the intention remains clear and present, and that is enough, more than enough. And the dog's tail moves once against the side of the bed, a slow, quiet motion that carries no excitement, only acknowledgement, as if he has heard everything he needed to hear, and the light in the room grows warmer still, casting long, gentle shadows that soften the edges of everything, turning the sterile space into something almost peaceful, almost sacred, and the man blinks slowly, his eyes adjusting, focusing more with each passing second. And when he looks at the dog again, there is something new in his expression, something that was not there before, not just recognition, but understanding, as if he knows now what has been done, what has been held together through the long stretch of hours he cannot remember. And Karen steps forward just slightly, her voice low and calm as she says, "You are safe. You are here." And this time the man's eyes shift toward her for a brief moment, acknowledging, but then they return to the dog, drawn back by something stronger, something that has already proven itself, and the room feels different now, not because anything dramatic has happened, but because everything that matters has, and outside the window the day has fully begun, the sky clear, the light steady, and somewhere in that quiet transition from night to morning, from waiting to return, something has been restored, not loudly, not suddenly, but in the only way that truly lasts, slowly, faithfully, and without ever letting go. The room breathes differently now, not with urgency, but with a calm that feels earned, as if every quiet second is a step forward that no one dares to rush. And the man's eyes remain open, no longer drifting but anchored, focused in a way that suggests he is not just awake, but returning, piece by piece, to a place he once knew. And his gaze stays on the dog as if nothing else in the room holds the same weight, as if everything else can wait. And the dog remains close, unmoving except for the slow rhythm of his breathing, his presence steady, unwavering, no longer a question but an answer that has already been given. And the man's hand shifts again, this time with intention, his fingers moving through the thick fur in a slow, uncertain motion, like someone relearning something familiar. And the dog responds not with excitement, but with stillness, allowing the moment to unfold without interruption, as if he understands that this is fragile, that this return must happen gently. And Karen stands a few steps back, watching the exchange with a quiet awareness, her hands resting loosely at her sides, because she knows that what is happening here cannot be guided, cannot be improved by intervention. It simply has to be allowed. And the monitor continues its steady pattern, no longer flickering or hesitating, each beat strong and consistent, echoing the quiet certainty that now fills the room. And the man's lips move again, forming a shape that almost becomes a word. And this time it is clearer, softer but more certain, and though the sound is faint, it carries meaning, it carries memory. And the dog's ears lift slightly, his eyes opening fully as he meets the man's gaze. And for a moment everything else fades. The machines, the light, the distant sounds of the hospital, all of it falling away until there is only this, only the space between them, filled with something that does not need explanation. And the man exhales slowly, a breath that feels deeper than the ones before, and his eyes soften, not with confusion, but with recognition that has settled into understanding. And Karen takes a small step forward, her voice gentle as she says, "You are doing well, you are back." But even as she speaks, she knows that the true return did not begin with her words. It began long before, out in the cold, in the quiet hours of the night when something chose to stay instead of leave. And now that choice has carried them here, to this moment where nothing dramatic needs to happen because everything important already has. And the dog remains beside the bed, his body relaxed but present, his gaze steady, as if he has no intention of leaving now that the waiting is over. And the man's hand rests against him, no longer searching, no longer uncertain, simply there, holding on to something that never let go. And in the soft morning light, the room feels less like a place of recovery and more like a place of reunion, quiet, complete, and real. The hours that follow do not rush forward but unfold gently, like pages turned with care, each moment carrying a quiet weight that no one in the room tries to disturb. And the man's awareness continues to gather itself, not all at once, but in fragments that slowly begin to connect, his eyes tracking more clearly now, his focus steady as he takes in the space around him, the light, the shapes, the presence beside him that never left. And when his gaze settles again on the dog, there is something deeper there now, something beyond recognition, something that feels like gratitude without needing to be spoken. And his hand moves again, more certain this time, fingers pressing lightly into the fur in a motion that carries memory, not learned in this moment, but remembered from another time, another place. And the dog leans into it just slightly, not pushing, not seeking more, just meeting the touch with quiet understanding, as if the bond between them does not need to be rebuilt because it was never broken. And Karen remains nearby, her presence calm and unobtrusive, checking the monitor with practiced ease but no longer with concern, because everything she sees now points in the same direction, steady, improving, real. And she allows herself a small, quiet smile, not out of relief alone, but out of something closer to wonder, because she knows that what has happened here cannot be explained in the language of charts or procedures. And the man's lips move again, the effort clearer now, the sound forming more fully, and though his voice is still soft, still rough with disuse, the word comes through this time, unmistakable, carried on. A breath that no longer trembles, and the dog's ears lift, his eyes focusing with a quiet intensity that mirrors the man's own. And there is a pause then, a stillness that feels almost like a conversation held without words. And in that silence something settles between them, something that confirms what both of them already know, that the distance has ended, that whatever was lost has found its way back. And the man exhales slowly, his body relaxing into the bed in a way it had not before, not from weakness but from release. As if the tension of being somewhere between leaving and returning has finally eased, and Karen steps forward just enough to adjust a small detail, her movements gentle, respectful of the space they have created, and she speaks softly, offering simple reassurance. But even as she does, she understands that the true reassurance is already there, lying beside the man, breathing in quiet rhythm, present in a way that no words could replace, and the light in the room continues to grow, filling the space with warmth that softens everything it touches. And for the first time since the night began, there is no sense of waiting left in the air, only presence, only the quiet certainty that something has come full circle, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the only way that truly matters, through loyalty that did not falter, and a connection that did not need to be proven because it simply never let go. The room settles into a quiet rhythm that feels less like recovery and more like life returning to its natural pace, unforced and steady, and the man's awareness continues to deepen, his eyes no longer searching but seeing, taking in the details of the space with a calm that replaces the earlier uncertainty. And when he looks again at the dog, there is no hesitation left, only recognition that has fully arrived, and his hand remains where it is, resting against the warm fur as if it has always belonged there, and the dog stays close, his presence no longer marked by tension or vigilance, but by something softer, something at peace, his body relaxed yet attentive in that quiet way that speaks of loyalty fulfilled rather than duty still waiting. And Karen moves gently around the room, adjusting what needs to be adjusted, her steps light, her voice low when she speaks to colleagues just outside the door, because even she senses that this space carries something fragile and complete, something that does not need to be disturbed. And when she returns, her eyes move between the man and the dog, taking in the stillness, the connection that holds steady without effort, and she pauses for a moment longer than necessary, not out of obligation but out of respect, because she understands now that what she witnessed through the night was not chance, not coincidence, but something that chose to stay when everything else might have let go. And the man draws in a deeper breath, his chest rising with more strength than before, and as he exhales his gaze softens, his fingers moving once more through the dog's fur in a slow, deliberate motion, and there is a faint hint of a smile at the edge of his expression, not fully formed, not yet, but present enough to change the way the room feels. And the dog responds in the simplest way, a quiet shift of weight, a subtle lean closer, as if acknowledging not just the touch but everything it carries. And outside the window the day has settled into full light, the sky clear, the shadows gone, and the world moves forward as it always does, unaware of what has taken place in this small, quiet room. And yet inside, something remains, something that will not fade with the passing hours, because it was never built on time to begin with. And Karen steps back once more, leaving the door slightly open as she returns to her duties, trusting that what needs to happen here will continue without her. And the man closes his eyes briefly, not from weakness but from rest, the kind that comes after something long awaited has finally arrived, and the dog remains beside him, unmoving except for the steady rhythm of his breathing. No longer waiting, no longer searching, simply there, exactly where he was meant to be, as if the night had only been a bridge leading to this quiet, certain moment where nothing more needs to be said, and nothing more needs to be done. By late morning the hospital has returned to its usual rhythm, footsteps echoing down the hall, voices low but steady, machines humming in quiet harmony, and yet inside the room something remains untouched by all of it, something that holds its own kind of stillness, its own kind of truth. And the man rests now with his eyes closed again, not in absence but in peace, the kind that comes when the body no longer has to fight to stay, when it can simply be, and his hand still rests against the dog, fingers loosely curled in the fur as if even in rest he chooses not to let go. And the dog lies beside the bed now, his body stretched along the floor, his head resting near the edge where the man's hand can still reach him, his breathing slow and even, his presence no longer defined by waiting but by belonging. And Karen passes by the doorway once more, pausing just briefly as she glances inside, not to check a monitor or adjust a setting, but simply to witness what is settled there. And she does not step in, she does not speak, because she understands that nothing needs to be added, Nothing needs to be explained, and as she walks on the hallway seems a little quieter than before, or maybe it is just her, carrying the weight of something she will not forget, something she cannot quite put into words, and inside the room the light has shifted, softer now, warmer, casting a gentle glow that wraps around both of them, and for a moment it feels as though time itself has slowed, not stopped, but softened, allowing this quiet reunion to exist fully, without interruption, without demand, and the man's breathing remains steady, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that no longer falters, and the dog does not move away, does not drift, does not sleep too deeply, because even now, even in peace, there is a part of him that remains aware, that remains present, not out of fear, not out of duty, but out of something simpler, something pure. And as the hours begin to pass, there are no dramatic changes, no sudden turns, just the quiet continuation of what has already begun, the steady return of strength, the quiet holding of something that never broke. And if someone were to walk by and glance inside, they might see nothing unusual, just a man resting, a dog lying close, a room like any other, but they would not see the night that came before, the hours of stillness. The choice to remain when leaving would have been easier, and they would not feel the way the air has changed, the way something invisible now fills the space with a quiet kind of grace. And in that stillness, in that simple closeness, the story finds its end not in noise or spectacle, but in something far more lasting, the quiet truth that some bonds do not need to be spoken to be understood, and some souls do not need to be called to find their way back, because they were never truly lost to begin with.